5 bodies lay lifeless in the Geee family home, their blood staining the floors of quiet Beeson, Illinois. As police sirens wailed, neighbors peered out their windows, unable to comprehend the horror unfolding before them. "We never thought something like this could happen here," whispered a stunned resident, her voice trembling. What the tight-knit community of 200 didn't realize was that the killer wasn't a stranger, but someone they all knew, someone who had shared meals with the Gees and was considered family. Welcome to Abyss of Crime. Today we uncover the tragic story that shattered this small town. Join us as we explore the darkness that descended upon Beeson that fateful September night. In the quiet town of Beeson, Illinois, where everyone knew their neighbors and doors were often left unlocked, the Geee family seemed to embody small-town American values. Rick and Ruth Geee, along with their children Justina, Dylan, and Austin, as well as Ruth's youngest daughter Tabitha Geee, lived a life that many would consider unremarkable. But sometimes, the most ordinary lives hide the darkest secrets. Rick Geee was known as a hard worker, often putting in long hours at his construction job to provide for his family. Ruth, a devoted mother, balanced her time between caring for the children and working part-time at a local diner. Their kids were typical small-town teenagers and children, involved in school activities and spending time with friends. But beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic family life, tensions were brewing. Financial stress had begun to take its toll on Rick and Ruth's relationship. The economic downturn had hit the construction industry hard, and Rick's work had become increasingly sporadic. Bills were piling up, and the strain was palpable in the Geee household. Enter Christopher Harris, Ruth's former brother-in-law, and Tabitha's biological father. Christopher had a troubled past, marked by a history of drug abuse, volatile relationships, and complicated family dynamics. After his marriage to Ruth's sister ended, Christopher later married Nicole Geee, Rick's daughter from a previous relationship. This entangled connection kept Christopher close to the Geee family, even after his relationships ended. Despite this proximity, Christopher's recent behavior had become increasingly erratic, causing concern among those who knew him. As September 21st, 2009 dawned, the Geee family went about their day as usual. Rick left early for a construction job in a neighboring town. Ruth prepared breakfast for the kids before they headed off to school. Tabitha, too young for school, spent the day at home with her mother. The older children, Justina, Dylan, and Austin, attended classes at the local school. That evening the family gathered for dinner, sharing stories and laughter, unaware of the impending tragedy. As night fell on Beeson, Christopher Harris was spiraling. He had spent the day using cocaine and drinking heavily, his mind clouded by a toxic mix of substances and unresolved emotions. His relationship with his current girlfriend was on the rocks, and financial troubles of his own were weighing heavily on him. In his drug-induced state, Christopher's thoughts turned dark, fixating on perceived slights and imagined wrongs. The following morning, a neighbor noticed something amiss at the Geee household. The family's dog was running loose, an unusual occurrence for the typically well-behaved pet. Concerned, the neighbor approached the house, calling out for Rick or Ruth. When no one answered, they peered through a window and saw a sight that would haunt them for years to come. The discovery set off a chain of events that would unravel the horrific truth of what transpired inside the Geee family home. As police sirens wailed and curious neighbors gathered, the once peaceful town of Beeson was thrust into the center of a nightmare that no one could have imagined. As dawn broke over Beeson on September 22, 2009, first responders had no idea they were about to encounter unimaginable horror. The quiet streets would soon be shattered by a tragedy that defied comprehension. At the Geee family home, an eerie silence greeted police officers. The front door creaked open, revealing an interior thick with oppressive stillness. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of blood, mingling with the acrid smell of fear and violence. Inside, the extent of the carnage became clear. Blood-spattered walls, once adorned with family photos, told a grim story. Shattered glass crunched underfoot, and overturned furniture spoke of a frenzied struggle. Rick and Ruth Geee lay motionless in the master bedroom, barely recognizable. The children's rooms held equally devastating scenes. Justina, Dylan, and Austin had been struck down in their beds, young lives extinguished with unfathomable cruelty. Amidst the darkness, a faint glimmer of hope emerged. Officers heard a soft whimper and found 3-year-old Tabitha Geee, barely clinging to life. She had suffered severe head trauma, but had somehow survived the brutal attack. As news spread, Beeson reeled in shock. Mary Morrical, a longtime resident, struggled to speak through her tears. "They were such good people," she whispered. "Who could do something like this?" The tragedy rippled through the community, shattering their sense of safety. Investigators meticulously combed the crime scene. A distinct shoe print in blood on the kitchen floor would later prove crucial. DNA evidence hinted at an outsider's presence, and a half-empty bottle of tequila on the counter raised questions about the attacker's state of mind. Blood spatter patterns told a story of frenzied violence. The perpetrator moved swiftly from room to room, using a tire iron, found discarded in the living room. The brutality suggested a personal connection. This was no random act. As the full extent of the tragedy came into focus, investigators faced a daunting task. Who could have harbored such intense hatred for this seemingly ordinary family? The brutal nature of the crime suggested a targeted assault, and detectives began unraveling a web of complex relationships and potential motives. The Geee family massacre left an indelible mark on Beeson. As the investigation unfolded, residents grappled with a new reality: that such violence could touch even the most tight-knit communities. The search for answers would lead investigators down a dark path, revealing hidden conflicts and exposing the chilling depths of human capacity for violence. As investigators delved deeper into the Geee family tragedy, a chilling possibility emerged. Could the killer be someone they knew, perhaps even someone they trusted? The truth would prove more shocking than anyone could have imagined. The initial stages of the investigation focused on gathering information from family and friends. Detectives interviewed neighbors, co-workers, and acquaintances, piecing together a timeline of the Geee family's final hours. At first, the evidence suggested an unknown intruder, with the shoe print in blood and unfamiliar DNA found at the scene. But seasoned detectives sensed something amiss. As they dug deeper, inconsistencies began to surface. The lack of forced entry and the personal nature of the attack hinted at a killer familiar with the family and their home. Suspicions grew as investigators examined the alibis provided by those closest to the Gees. Among those questioned were Christopher Harris and his brother Jason. Initially, their stories seemed to align, claiming to have been together far from Beeson on the night of the murders. But as detectives pressed for details, their narrative crumbled. Phone records contradicted their statements about their whereabouts. Witnesses placed the brothers near the Geee home on that fateful night. The breakthrough came when a family friend recalled seeing Christopher Harris's vehicle parked near the Geee residence around the time of the murders. This observation unraveled the entire case. Harris's actions following the massacre took on a sinister new light. In a chilling display of deception, Harris attended the Geee family funeral, offering condolences to grieving relatives. He stood among the mourners, shedding tears for the lives he had taken. This act of apparent grief masked a disturbing ability to maintain a convincing facade of innocence. As police closed in, more damning evidence surfaced. A friend of Harris revealed that Christopher had confessed to the murders during a moment of panic. On October 1st, 2009, just over a week after the massacre, Christopher Harris was arrested and charged with the murders of Rick and Ruth Geee and their children. The arrest sent shockwaves through Beeson. Residents struggled to reconcile the horrific acts with the man they thought they knew. How could someone with such close ties to the family commit such an unthinkable crime? As the case against Harris solidified, investigators turned their attention to understanding the events of that fatal night. What had driven Christopher Harris to unleash such violence against people he knew intimately? The answers would reveal a dark tangle of motives, from drug-fueled rage to a desperate attempt to cover up an initial crime. The details of that night, soon to be uncovered, would paint a picture more horrific than anyone could have imagined. The night of September 21st, 2009, began quietly in Beeson, Illinois. As darkness fell, Christopher Harris approached the Geee family home, his mind clouded by a toxic mix of alcohol and cocaine. The peaceful evening was about to shatter into a nightmare of unimaginable violence. Harris entered the house, ostensibly to see Justina Constant, driven by a predatory intent to sexually assault the 16-year-old. His twisted motives set the stage for the horrors that followed. But within moments, the atmosphere shifted. The first blow likely fell on Justina herself. Her vibrant life cut tragically short. Harris moved through the house with chilling efficiency, his drug-fueled rage unleashing devastating attacks on each family member. The violence was staggering in its intensity. Justina's injuries were so severe that parts of her skull were later found missing. But it was 14-year-old Dylan who put up the fiercest fight. In a desperate bid for survival, he leaped from a window and fled into the night. Harris, consumed by his frenzy, pursued relentlessly. Jason Harris, a horrified witness, later described the heartbreaking scene. Christopher cornered Dylan, striking him repeatedly with a tire iron. The ferocity of the attack left Dylan's body with over 100 distinct injuries. As dawn broke, the full extent of the carnage became apparent. 5 members of the Geee family lay dead, their lives brutally cut short. But amidst the horror, a miracle emerged. 3-year-old Tabitha Geee, Christopher's own daughter, had somehow survived the onslaught. Tabitha's survival was nothing short of extraordinary. Found in a closet, covered in blood, she clung to life despite a severe head injury. Multiple skull fractures and brain swelling necessitated immediate surgery. Her resilience in the face of such overwhelming violence became a symbol of hope in the darkest of times. The tragedy stemmed from a perfect storm of factors. Harris's history of drug abuse and volatile relationships had primed him for violence. The cocaine and alcohol in his system lowered his inhibitions and amplified his aggression. And perhaps most chillingly, there was the possibility that the initial attack on Justina had triggered a desperate attempt to eliminate all witnesses. As investigators pieced together the events, Harris's defense team claimed self-defense, alleging Dylan attacked him with a knife. But this narrative crumbled under the weight of evidence. The brutality of the attacks, multiple victims, and Harris's attempt to flee all pointed to a far more sinister truth. Tabitha's journey of recovery offered a glimmer of light in this dark tale. Despite her severe injuries, she made remarkable progress. While the emotional scars run deep, Tabitha's strength and resilience continue to inspire those around her, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and heal, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy. On June 4, 2013, Christopher Harris was convicted on 5 counts of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours, underscoring the strength of the evidence against him. Harris received the maximum sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. This ensured he would never again walk free. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, except for muffled sobs from the gallery. Among those present was Nicole Geee, Christopher's estranged wife, and Rick Gee's daughter. Initially, Nicole had publicly defended Harris, refusing to believe he was capable of such violence. However, as evidence mounted, including Harris's confession to a friend, her faith was shaken. By the time of the trial, Nicole had distanced herself from Harris, focusing instead on rebuilding her life and honoring her family's memory. Jason Harris, Christopher's brother, faced charges of obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. Though Jason claimed he had no direct involvement in the murders, his failure to report Christopher's actions and his initial attempts to mislead investigators weighed heavily against him. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The trial brought a measure of closure to Beeson, but the scars of the tragedy remain. Memorials were held in the Geee family's honor, with the community rallying around young Tabitha, the sole survivor. Now, under the care of extended family, Tabitha's journey of recovery became a symbol of resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. The Geee family massacre profoundly shattered Beeson's sense of security, transforming a once trusting community into one haunted by tragedy. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the hidden capacities for violence within seemingly ordinary individuals. While justice was served, the aftermath continues to impact survivors, family members, and the entire community. Addressing substance abuse and preventing familial violence is crucial in preventing similar tragedies in the future. We can make a difference by supporting relevant organizations and advocacy groups. As we reflect on this devastating event, we must ask ourselves, how can we foster safer communities and stronger support systems for those at risk?